Hi there, my name is Johnny Caldor. I am the co-founder of Pugpig, and we are a publishing platform that powers websites, digital editions and mobile apps for news media and consumer magazine publishers. I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes taking you through a quick preview of a State of the Digital Publishing Market report that we'll be publishing probably in about 4 or 5 weeks' time. So just quickly about our approach. We got data in 2 different ways. So first of all, we took aggregate data from across our platform, across about 350 news, media and consumer magazine brands, looking at macro level trends across daily news media, weekly news media and monthly consumer media. And then we augmented that with a set of interviews, 40 plus interviews with senior executives and a mixture of CEOs, head of technology, head of product, from across a whole range of publishers. And you can see them listed there: The Economist, News UK, The Wall Street Journal, Tortoise, and a whole lot more. And then we've pulled that together into a report, which again, as I said, we'll be publishing in a number of weeks. So normally this would take about an hour to go through, so I'm really going to zip through quite quickly, and there will be considerably more data in the report. So let's start with some of the data, just a few highlights. To begin with, we just wanted to look at the trends over the course of this year across those 3 groups. And as you can see, and probably understandably, there was a big peak in digital activity and engagement from February, when everything started to go wrong with the world. And you can see, just to be clear, these lines aren't cumulative, so these are separate lines between news media, weekly media and consumer media. And you can see then, therefore, that news media had the biggest jump, and has managed to maintain that. It's hard to see whether this drop-off is a holiday drop-off and whether that pops up again, as we're just getting the data in right now, but we'll be keeping a track of that fairly closely. We'll get a couple more months in when we publish. We're also seeing that the dailies are really winning on audience and engagement. So you can see this first chart on the left. This is how often people are coming into, in this case, apps, and how long they're staying. And I think, unsurprisingly, the dailies get more visits per month, as more than the weeklies, and the weeklies more than the monthlies. You would expect that. I think what's unexpected is that the dailies are also getting longer session durations. We're seeing 20 minutes plus on our daily news apps, and considerably less in the monthlies. And I think partly that is because more time has been spent on the user experiences around the dailies, and the monthlies now, we're doing quite a bit of work in order to change that. So I think you will see that monthly number changing over the course of this year. You then look at the difference, or we then looked at the difference between live apps and edition-based apps. So edition-based apps, I think fairly obvious. You download an edition, let's say, of The Economist, and you read it cover to cover. The live apps are the apps where you're jumping in and out throughout the day, and they're constantly updated. So first of all, monthly sessions between the live and the edition apps, you would expect live to be higher, and I think again that's probably because there's work to be done there, and the edition apps are a more mature product. And then the session duration, I think this is not surprising actually, that people are spending longer in edition-based apps, because tends to be more content at any given time that you're reading through, because you're reading through an entire edition. We're also seeing, and this is a number that changes every year and becomes a greater skew towards mobile. We're seeing that if you look at mobile minutes, over 81% now of mobile minutes come through tablets and mobile devices, and the rest, the 19%, being desktop. So if you're targeting your audience, it needs to be on mobile. And then if you compare between digital editions and live apps, what again would be unsurprising is that with the live apps, you're seeing they're almost totally mobile, because people are using those apps on the go. And when you look at the edition-based apps, Still a skew towards mobile, but a more balanced mix between mobile and tablets. Okay, there's loads more data that I could take you through, but again, because time is short, I'm going to move on to the interviews, which I think there's some really interesting stuff here. So the first question we asked was around optimism. So we asked, are you optimistic about the future of your business? And we asked, are you optimistic about the future of publishing in general? And you can see the good news is that there is overwhelming optimism, particularly for everybody's own company, because I think they have a sense of what they're trying to do and how they're going to tackle, the situation they find themselves in right now. You can see that actually news media is more optimistic than consumer media, which probably rings true given the increased interest in news media for consumers over the course of the last year or two. And then over here you can see that there's a certain amount of lack of optimism for the rest of the industry. In other words, we've got our ship sorted out, but we're somewhat worried about the rest of the industry. But you can see still largely optimistic. We then asked, what are the big challenges you're facing right now? And we asked our respondents to rank them in order of importance, from growing subscriptions acquisitions, increasing subscriptions retention, diversifying revenues, managing decline of ad revenue, and managing decline of news trade revenue. And as you can see, growing and retaining subscribers is the most important thing for pretty much everybody, closely followed by diversifying revenues. We then said, are you confident that you're prepared to meet these challenges? And I think, as you can see here, news media, again, feels somewhat more confident that they're in a position to actually deal with these challenges that they're facing, slightly less optimism in consumer media. So then we switched a little bit and we asked, what's driving your growth for the coming year? So specifically growth and not just revenue. And again, we asked to rank between subscriptions and memberships, new products, ads and sponsorship, new markets, price increases, e-commerce, and syndication and licensing. And you can see very clear trend here again that subscriptions and memberships are at the top of the list. They're the top of the priority list for growth. Closely followed by new products, and then ads and sponsorship. So it's interesting now that there is this real shift around new stuff and subscriptions ahead of advertising revenue. We then asked a more general question, which is, what are you thinking about? What's on your mind right now? And what are you excited about? And again, I've just pulled out a couple of interesting quotes and paraphrased some of them because there are a lot of similar themes. But here you can see again, a lot of this is about subscriptions. So subscriptions, retention. I think I'm also in front of another one, yes, that the business believes in subscriptions at last. And this interesting one, which I think everybody's seen, which is shifting from a speed measured in years to one measured in months. So things are really happening quickly now. We then asked a few questions about the platforms. And the first question, or the first two questions, were broadly about the platforms in general. And we asked, do you believe that these platforms are a force for good for the publishing industry? And as you can see, almost nobody agreed that that was the case. And then we asked specifically, do you think that the platforms should be regulated? And actually, a small proportion said disagree. Even those, I think, felt that they don't really believe in regulation at all. And should they believe in regulation, they think that they should be regulated. So I think there was a pretty unanimous decision that if you believe in regulation, then yes, the platforms should be regulated. We then dug into each of the platforms to get a sense of the day-to-day working relationship that each of these companies have with Google, Apple, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Snap. And what was interesting, we basically did a cumulative sum here, where if someone was happy, we gave them 2 points. If they were unhappy, we took away 2 points, and we ended up with this score. And what you're seeing is a mixture of how much people care about the relationship, and in what way do they care. And what was interesting was that while there is general dissatisfaction with how the platforms are approaching the industry as a whole, I think the day-to-day working relationships, particularly with Google and Apple, were pretty good, which I think was quite surprising. I'd say Twitter, TikTok, and Snap, at least 80% of the respondents didn't really have a relationship, and the stronger relationships with the ones that we're working with day-to-day, Google, Apple, Facebook. We then started to look into revenue drivers, and there were two specific questions to begin with, which were trying to understand a sense of the total value that each of these groups provide to the business. And then the next slide was around the value per user, so the kind of the quality of revenue. And we asked again to rank between subscribers and members on the web, subscribers and members in the app, both of those regardless of where they subscribe, so in other words, at any given moment where they are. Free website but direct, free website via SEO, free website via social, and then third-party free and third-party paid, so things like Apple News and Zinio and so on. And so what you're seeing again, unsurprisingly, that subscribers are the most valuable in terms of revenue, initially on the web and then in app. And then you've got free web following close behind, along with free web and SEO, with the third-party paid platforms coming up in last place. So that's total value. If you then switch the question around a little bit and you're looking at value per user, so this is more about the quality of the revenue you're getting rather than just the sheer scale of the audience, things change a little bit. So you've still got subscribers and members on the web at the top, but then you've got subscribers and members in app coming in number 2, and then the owned web, the free web direct, following closely with the SEO and social behind. So it's interesting how you get the app starting to come in, even though they're a significantly smaller audience, because the quality of that revenue is seen to be higher. We then did a deep dive into different delivery channels. So we wanted to get a sense of a number of things. So we started with current spend, then the audience that you get from that spend, the revenue that you get from that audience, and then the strategic importance going forward. So there's 4 questions in a row, and we're comparing print with web, app, email newsletters, events, podcasts, e-commerce, OTT video, including YouTube channels, and smart speaker skills. And again, as you can see, unsurprisingly, print out in front in terms of the amount of spend. And just to be clear, the spend here is operational day-to-day spend as well as investment. The website closely following, the apps next, and then a whole kind of bunch of other ones, email newsletters and events and podcasts. So that's the spend. Then if you switch that to the audience size, then you see a switch over to the web, as you would expect. So web being by far the biggest audience, print second, and then app and email newsletters kind of following after that. Next, if you move on from audience to revenue, then it changes again, where you've got the website still beating print for revenue, print in second place, and then the app again coming in third place, with everything else trailing quite a long way behind. And the events, just to be clear here, we were talking about events not in the COVID world, but more in the in the world where events are continuing to run. And then finally, and probably most interestingly, the strategic importance. So as you look to the future, how would you rank these in strategic importance to the business? And again, looking up at news media, the app and the website were pretty much neck and neck. I would say they swapped first place, print third, and then emails, newsletters, events, and podcasts following behind. So when it comes to apps, we wanted to dig in a little bit here. You've got options, right? There are digital edition apps, there are live apps, and then there are these Swiss Army knife apps, which are the ones which do everything and they build it in together. So we wanted to know, first of all, what do you do? What sort of apps have you got? And with news media, most have both, actually. They have both digital edition apps and live apps. And some, about half of them, have those then built into these universal apps which do everything. We then asked, okay, what's the right app strategy? Should you have one app and that does everything, a kind of Swiss Army knife app, or should you actually have a small group of apps which are particularly targeted to specific user groups. And as you can see, the audience was fairly split with a skew just towards having specific apps. We then asked about iOS 14 and Apple's new update. There's a number of things that they introduced over the course of the week, and we wanted to know what the impact of those things, or the perceived impact, would be for publishers. So we asked about in-app renewal management, Apple News or Apple News Plus hijacking links, family sharing of purchases, home screen widgets. So these are the sort of Android type widgets that you can put onto the homepage, which go beyond just showing an app tile. They actually show some data or some content. And then iOS apps running on the desktop with the new ARM chipped based desktop computers and laptop computers. So you can see quite a way far out in front the in-app renewal management, so putting messages in the app to tell people that their subscription is going to renew and trying to promote that. Apple News hijacking as a bad thing rather than a good thing. And then family sharing, home screen widgets, and lastly, the iOS apps running on macOS. And it was an interesting one, the iOS apps running on macOS, because one of the respondents said apps on the desktop will completely change the way we think of apps, and they put it number one. And everybody else, I think, thought it would be less important and impactful. We're actually unsure. I think it's going to be one of those things, and until it actually arrives, we're going to be unclear what the impact is, and then suddenly it'll become very obvious. So I would definitely keep an eye out for that. We then wanted to talk about product development in the business and how it's driven. So we asked to rank how product decisions are made, and to rank through analytics, through user feedback from existing products, the editor, user testing in controlled user groups, and following the competition. And as you can see, probably it's good news that analytics drive most product decisions, which is what you would hope for. User feedback coming second, and then the editor very close in third place. And actually, as you might imagine, some organizations the editor was number one, in other organizations less so. So there are still a number of news organizations where the editor really still is driving this. You notice that in consumer magazines that's less the case, and I think you would probably expect that. And then we talked about the role of technology, and there was a conversation that James Murdoch had a long time ago with Steve Jobs, asking him, do you think a modern media company should be a technology company? Expecting Steve Jobs to say, yes, absolutely, you need to be a technology company. And in fact, he said the opposite. He said, no, you should be a content company, I'm a technology company. And it was a really interesting conversation. And so we wanted to put that question to the people we were talking to as part of the survey, and it was extremely polarizing. We basically got one or two people not being sure, but pretty much everyone else was either, yes, absolutely, we should be a technology company. And we had a similar number of people saying, absolutely not, we should be focusing on the content. You can see with news, actually, the strongly agree pipped it. But then we asked the question, do you believe that you should be building your core technology in-house? And 85% think that we should not be building core technology in-house. So while we should be a technology company, we should be leveraging third parties and integrating their technology in a smart way. So now the last question, and there were more questions, but I've cut it down a little bit for this, was just simply, if you could snap your fingers right now and change anything, what would you do? And these were some of the, I'd say, what are some of the more interesting responses we got. A lot were around the platforms, and we wished that we'd done a deal with the platforms earlier on and done a better deal. I love this. I'd go back 10 years and stop the pursuit of scale for the sake of scale and help consumers understand the true value of high quality journalism. I think that's brilliant. For me, I'd probably go back 20 years to do that, but I think I like the sentiment. And I think over here, I think a lot of it was better monetization models and making mobile truly, making mobile truly mobile first, rather than thinking of it as an afterthought, which I think a lot of publishers still feel they're doing. They're really trying to change that, but they're finding it hard. And again, reducing dominance of the big platforms, which I think was a sentiment that carried through all of these conversations. So that's it. Hopefully you got something out of that. As you can see, there's so much more in this data than I could really cover in this short presentation. If you'd like to know more, do get in touch. and we'll be publishing the report, as I said, in about 5 or 6 weeks' time. Thank you for your time.